Let's get this show started, people. Let me clear my throat. This is Yasha Ben Yishrael back at you one more again with one more good old special today. Today we will be talking about the correlation between the Roman-Jewish Wars, the Kitos War, the Bar Kokhba Revolt, Africa, and America. Right? But before we get off into that, I want to talk about what these things are, right? I want to talk about the Roman-Jewish Wars. Let me look that up, and we're going to see what that is real quick. We're going to jump right into this. Allow me to share my screen. No time wasted. Look up the Roman-Jewish Wars. So we can have a general idea of what we're going to be talking about here. It doesn't make no sense in talking about these things, and people don't even know what the hell these things are. They are historical accounts. They are historical events, and we need to deal with them. So we're going to deal with the Roman-Jewish Wars. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. We pulled it up. And we're going to see exactly what these things are. I'm going to blow up the screen over here. Nah, we don't want to do that, because then I can't get to the other screen. So these here, you follow my cursor. You see I'm circling this word, the Roman-Jewish Wars. Again, I have to say that the only reason why we're going through this part, because it makes no sense of talking about something that the people don't understand what we're talking about. And we're talking about the correlation between these wars in history and Africa and the Americas, right? So when you read, you don't have to read much. All you have to do is pretty much read the first paragraph. The first paragraph will pretty much let you know everything that you need to know. The details comes after that. It's called the main idea. So let's read and look into the main idea of what the Jewish Roman Wars are. The Jewish Roman Wars were a series of large-scale revolts by the Jews of the Eastern Mediterranean against the Roman Empire between 66 and 135 CE, which is the Common Era. The first Jewish war was between 66 and 73 CE, which is the Common Era. And the Bar Kokhba Revolt, which is 132 to 136 CE, were nationalist. Keep that in mind. They were nationalist rebellions, striving to store an independent Judean state. They were nationalist rebellions. What nation did the Judeans belong to? They belonged to the nation of Israel. So these were the Bar Kokhba Revolt was a nationalist rebellion, striving to restore an independent Judean state. It's going to surprise you where this took place at. While the Kitos War was more of an ethno-religious conflict. Important, right? The Bar Kokhba Revolt was a nationalist rebellion, striving to restore an independent Judean state, while the Kitos War was more of an ethno-religious conflict. mostly fought outside Judean province. That's important because that will solidify the correlationship between all of these events, peoples, countries, religions, and nationalities that I just spoke of. All right. It said, hence, some sources use the term Jewish-Roman wars to refer only to the first Jewish-Roman war between 66 and 73 AD. We in the Israelite community, we know it of the Roman-Jewish wars of 70 AD, right? And the Bar Kokhba revolt, right? You say some sources only refer to the Roman-Jewish wars as the first Roman-Jewish war and the Bar Kokhba revolt, while others include the Kitos War as of the Jewish-Roman wars. See, they try to exclude the Kitos War and out of it, and some try to exclude the Bar Kokhba revolt out of it. Because truthfully, when you think of the Roman-Jewish wars, most people think of what took place in 70 AD, and that is the Roman-Jewish wars of 66 and 73 Common Era. Most people think of that right there as the Roman-Jewish war. Well, that was the start of it. It took and it unfolded in three waves. Okay, so while others include the Kitos War as one of the Roman-Jewish wars. Yeah, a lot of scholars do it, including me. And then the problem is that a lot of people take the Kitos War, and some even, as you have seen in demonstrations between guys like me and Chris Harris and Garfield, tried to exclude the Bar Kokhba revolt and the Kitos War out of the whole Roman-Jewish wars in at large, right? So we're going to go back. We're going to exit out of here, right? Because we don't really need to get much more off into the details. So we're going to exit out of there, and we're going to, that's the Roman-Jewish War. Let's go to the Kitos War, right? And we're going to need you to share my screen here. Look up the Kitos War. This is good. Okay. We got that there. Okay, I'm going to read about the Kitos War. Remember that the main, if you want to always look up the main idea is always in the first paragraph, in the first few sentences, right? The further up top you go, that's where you get the main idea at, and then everything that goes down after that is the main idea in detail, right? So we're going to read about the Kitos War. The Kitos War between 115 and 117. In Hebrew, it is called Mared HaGuliot. Mared HaGuliot is romanized as Mared HaGuluyot. Guluyot. Or the Morad, what's that? The Morad Het Fuzut, right? The Morad HaFuzut, and that is called the rebellion of the diaspora, right? So we're looking at the word Tfuzut and the word Geluyut, right? These words deal with the rebellion of the diaspora, right? Then you have the Latin tumultus Eudicus, right? Tumultus Eudicus. You see the root word tumult in there. And Eudicus meaning Judaeus or Judean, dealing with the tumult of the Jews, right? It's saying that it was one of the Ketos War was one of the major Roman Jewish wars. The rebellion erupted in 115 when most of the Roman armies were fighting Trajan's Parthian War. Most of the Romans was fighting Emperor Trajan's Parthian War on the eastern banner of the Roman Empire. You read that right there? It said, major uprising by Jews in Cyrentia. Where's Cyrentia? Cyrentia was a senatorial province of the Roman Republic and later the Roman Empire, established in 67 BC, which included the islands of Crete and the region of Cyrentia in modern-day Libya. These areas were settled by Greek colonists. These areas were settled by Greek colonists from the 8th to the 6th century BCE after Alexander the Great's death, right? His short-lived empire was partitioned between the generals during the War of Diadochi. Cyrentia ended up under Egyptian rule, except for Crete, which remained independent. And Cyrentia should have ended up in Egyptian rule, because when you look at Cyrentia right here today, you see that where my arrow is? Follow the arrow, follow the cursor. See where I'm circling that area right here? This is Cyrentia right here. And that is in what they would call modern-day Tunisia today. It was a Libyan province, right? The Libyans, but when you really look at it, it was just smack dab right next to, just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Egypt, because all of this right here, actually all of this right here going down from where I'm circling that in the map was Egypt, right? We look at the big map. This is North Africa. All of this here is African land, right? But this is habitable land. Most down under here is desert land, right? But this is Egypt, right? This is Israel. The Romans, which lived over in here, right? No, excuse me. The Romans were up over in here, right? These Romans decided that they wanted to rule the world. And they started by attacking here and here, which is Israel, right? And this here is Egypt, right? All of this here is Egypt. But all of this area from North Egypt all the way on over to the top here was the areas where the children of Israel ran to during the Roman Jewish Wars. See Rome over here to your left, right? And to your right here, the Jews. You had the Roman Jewish revolt that took place. Egypt had its play in there too as well, right? Because Egypt was conquered by Rome. All of this here, white territory, is the area that Rome conquered. All of this, even up here to the Americas, not the Americas, to the Hebrides, which is Ireland, Scotland, right? England. All of that was Roman territory. It was a part of the Roman province. All of this. And all of this area right here, right? All of this area in white was Roman dominated. I'm trying to move my screen over, right? moving a little too far. Try to get it to go back some. So I'm talking all of it. Rome didn't conquer just Israel, right? It didn't conquer just it didn't conquer this Israel right here, right? Rome starting from over here where you see me at. You see this area in red? That is modern day like Tunisia, somewhere between Morocco, Tunisia area, over Libya, you know. All of that, you must understand, was Roman territory. And when the Romans, they had a very, very hard beef with these people right here that lived in this area. They were a stubborn, stiff-necked people that didn't want to bow down to nobody and no thing, arrogant, right? They didn't believe no king should rule over them other than a king that their people appoint over them, up under the religious system. Didn't understand that this was a religious, the Battle of Kitos was a religio-ethno conflict, right? Because of the religion and ethnicity of the Jews. These people felt that they were superior, and according to their text, no people should ever rule over Israelites but an Israelite. And these people over here, well, dominated by Rome. Because that was Rome. Roman territory, all of this actually was Roman territory, but this area where I'm circling, and I need to go up a little bit more. All of this area right here, this within this map, was dominated heavily first by Rome. And when they got over here to these Israelites right here to the left, to the right of the screen, right? When these people from over in here, these Greek and Roman people made their ways through the waterways, some through land because they had horses and stuff, you know. They made their way. When they attacked this area right here, this was the jewel, right? This was the jewel of the world, this area right here. This is why it's called the Fertile Crescent. And in Swahili, that word Kitos means jewel. Okay? Kitos means jewel. Keep that in mind. In Swahili and Africa, there's a correlation. We're dealing linguistically now. Keep your ears open, people. Now, we're dealing with these people right here. Enough of that. We'll deal with that later. Right here, this is where they went. People have often asked me, guys like Chris Harris, guys like Garfield, on the Sarnetta show, they asked, how did the Israelites from this area here get over into this area here? Because this is Egypt right here, right? Just right here where the water stopped. This water pretty much divides Israel from Egypt, pretty much. The area, the northern delta, the area known as Avaris, way before this area people ever dominated this region. This people right here from Egypt, Egypt dominated Israel, Egypt dominated northern Africa, Egypt dominated the Mediterranean islands, which evolved out to be both Greece and Rome. So Egypt had a role in this, y'all. Hit that like button. I need some comments. You know, somebody to put some comments in the comment section. Tell me what you think about this information, right? Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe, most definitely, right? So when we look into here, look at this. This is the delta. All of this was Israel. This here is Egypt. This here area that's in Burgundy is Cyrentia as well as Crete. This is Crete. Cyrentia has always been dominated by Crete during the time of the Roman Empire. Prior to the Roman Empire, this area was dominated by Greece, which is right here. And that's Rome over to the left. Roman islands over to the left. Show the screen up a little bit more. Right, all of this, the Roman areas, the Greek areas, right? The island of Crete, Cyrentia dominated and ruled Crete. Prior to that, it was up under Egyptian territory. The Egyptians ruled it. If you look at geography, you can see that these things are not hard to believe. Understanding that nobody has an issue with understanding the fact that Egypt was one of the oldest and most dominant societies in the ancient world for a very, 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 very long time. But I don't like to call it Egypt because it all took up all of this land mass going over here to the right. All of this area down here and way down even further that this map doesn't record. It only records just a little small area of Egypt. Egypt goes further down, further than that. Actually, Egypt includes all this area. Follow the cursor. Going down, right? But they don't put that on there because most of that area is desert. Almost, most, if not all of it, is desert area. It's deserted. Right? So we talked about the War of Quitos. We talked about the Bar Kokhba revolt. Not the Bar Kokhba, the Quitos War and the Roman-Jewish War. We talked about that. And I'm going to look a little bit more into some information I saw here about the Roman-Jewish Wars. Background, it said the tension between the Jewish population in the Roman Empire and the Greek and Roman populations mounted over the course of the 1st century CE, gradually escalating with variant violent events, mainly throughout Judea. Remember, I told you it was that area where the Jews lived at in Israel. That area was very rebellious because of, the same reason why Jews was, the 3 Hebrew boys was rebellious towards the Babylonians, which came way earlier, right? 700, close to 1,000 years earlier, 800 years earlier, right? So it said, well, parts of the Judean population occasionally erupted into, it's gradually escalating through many parts. Okay, let me read that whole thing. The tension between the Jewish population in the Roman Empire and the Roman and Greek populations mounted over the course of the 1st century CE, gradually escalating with variant violent events, mainly throughout Judea. Insurrections against the Roman Empire. Several incidents also included in other parts of the Roman Empire. Most notable, the Alexandrian pogroms, which is in Egypt. So both Egypt and Cyrentia was major places in Africa where these wars had taken place. The Roman-Jewish Wars had taken place at the northern foot of Africa. And these are facts, right? So the escalation of tension finally erupted as the Great Revolt of Judea, which began in the year 66 CE. It erupted initially due to Greek and Jewish religious tension. right? So these wars, it was Greek and Jewish, but not only Greek and Jewish, but Greek and Roman too, because the Romans adopted the lingua franca and the ideologies of the Greeks, the religious and the religions as well. They just put their spin on it, but it was the same thing, right? It erupted initially due to Greek and Roman religious tensions, but later escalated due to the anti-taxation protests and attacks upon Roman citizens. So these Jews, they basically was, as Rome made their dominance into the land and tried to conquer the Israelites pretty wasn't buying it. They wasn't paying. Rome wanted to exert taxes on these people. They wasn't paying them no taxes. Rome wanted to have Israel follow the Roman religion and to pretty much submit to Rome, just like Nebuchadnezzar and the three Hebrew boys. And the story, just like history repeated itself, they did not bow down. And this is what caused these wars, right? So later, so the Jews began to start attacking the Roman citizens. But see, what really happened here is that the first Roman-Jewish wars occurred in 66 to 73 AD, which was 10 years prior to this, 10, 15 years prior to this war. And that first war was where Rome was trying to establish its dominance. Hold on for 1 second. People, we have a phone call. Or he just left. Rome was trying to establish its dominance. I wanted to get that phone call, but we're going to go ahead and continue on. Rome was trying to continue its dominance in Israel. They caused Emperor Vespasian and Titus. You can read about this story in the annals of the Roman-Jewish wars written by Flavius Josephus. And he talked about how Rome came through Israel and just plundered the entire land. And those who didn't kill, they sent off into slavery. And Flavius Josephus talked about how the Israelites went into Africa, into Egypt, right? This is what, because this beef started between Israel and the Greeks. It started in Egypt between the Israelites and Greeks, right around the 6th century. I mean, not the 6th century, around 60 AD. It was tension growing between the Israelites and the Greeks in Egypt. What was happening was that the Africans were pretty much trying to take back the land from the Greco-Romans invaders. Okay. So the beef went down. Emperor Vespasian talked about how the survivors, those that didn't kill, was packed in ships and taken into and dispersed on the other side of the Nile River. The question was asked, where were they taken into ships from? The question was asked to me by Garfield and both Chris Harris, which actually was a stupid question because they were already in Egypt already. So they took them in Egypt and packed them to the ships, took them down to the southern extremities and dispersed them to the Nile, to the other side of the Nile River. And this is why there's scriptures in the Bible, in the book of, I believe, Zephaniah, that talk about beyond the rivers of the rivers of Ethiopia, how my suppliants will reach out unto me from beyond the rivers, on the other side of the rivers. Beyond is the other side, right? Going towards the far west, right? Because Israel was to the east of the rivers of Ethiopia. So beyond the rivers of Ethiopia would be to the west and to the south. Okay. And any other side going east of the Nile would have been within proximity, right? It wouldn't have been beyond, it would have been within. So let me get back to this reading. Several incidents, right, also occurred in other parts of the Roman Empire, most notably Alexandria in Egypt, targeting the large Jewish community of Alexandria in the Egypta province, right? So the Jews and the Romans really got down, and those that were of the Greco-Roman extraction, they were really getting it in with the Israelites right here in this land, right here, when they couldn't do it in Israel because they didn't have the power that they had in Egypt, because Egypt had been dominated by the predecessors of the Romans for 500 years, 600 years or better by this point, right? So they had a strong hold there in Egypt, and this is why the escalation of tension finally erupted as the Great Revolt of Judea, which began in 66 CE. It erupted initially due to Greek and Roman Jewish tensions, but later escalated due to taxation, right, of the Roman military, and the garrisons of Judea was quickly overran by the rebels of the proto-Roman king Agrippa. So the Israelites began to start dominating these people. You know, they began to, the Israelites struck first blow, and they struck a first hard blow. Understand this. But that blow was overran by Agrippa the second, and he fled to Jerusalem. Right. So excuse me, it says the Roman military garrison of Judea was quickly overran by rebels. So basically the Roman military that was in Judea was overran by Jewish rebels, and the pro-Roman king Agrippa, which was over Egypt, fled Jerusalem, together with Roman officials to Galilee. Castius Gallus, the legate of Syria, brought the Syrian army based on the 7th century Forminata, reinforced by auxiliary troops to restore order and quell the revolt. The legion, however, was ambushed and defeated by Jewish rebels, like I stated, by Jewish rebels at the Battle of Beth Horon, a result that shocked the Roman leadership. Man, basically what had happened was that, and what's the relationship between the Roman Jewish Wars, the Bar Kokhba revolt, and we're going to read off into that a little later, right? Well, actually, we can just go ahead and get off into it. But as I'm getting off into it, we can discuss what the real deal was. Bar Kokhba revolt. Push that up, make sure we get that ready for the reading, so we can get to know what that is all about. Go back here. I'm gonna let y'all know what this all really was all about. What was really going on in the grand scheme of things, right? And this is what my elders taught me. So we got the Bar Kokhba revolt up there. Allow me to share my screen. Paya. This should be short. Oh no, we're gonna have to go in there and see. But we're going to see. We talk about the Bar Kokhba revolt, right? Just the last of the Roman-Jewish Wars, right? This is the Bar Kokhba revolt. In Hebrew, that is Marad Bar Kaka. So in Hebrew, it is Bar Kokhba. I don't see where the other B is in there, but that's like a C, a U, a CCA, which would be Bakuka. I'm explaining y'all what these sounds is. The bar, that would be kuka. So Barkuka, Mared Barkuka is actually Mared Bar-Kokhba, right? Also known as the Third Jewish Revolt or the Jewish Expedition, as the Romans named it. In Latin, it's called the Expedito Judaica. Expedito Judaica. And it was a rebellion by the Jews of the Roman province of Judea, led by Simon Bar Kokhba against the Roman Empire, the last of the three Roman-Jewish wars. And it was fought in 132 to 136 CE. So this thing started from 66 to 136 Common Era. The revolt erupted. The revolution, right? The revolt erupted as a result of religious and political tension in Judea following on the failed first revolt in 66 and 70 CE. So the Bar Kokhba revolt goal, it's a war that's been going on, that's been stemming all the way back to 66 AD, which was the first Roman-Jewish Wars. It said, including the establishment of a large Roman military presence in the province, changed the administration of economic life, and the failure of revolts in the diaspora. So the establishment of the Roman military presence in these provinces, remember I told you about the provinces that they were taking over were provinces that was dominated by Black people at that time, even in the Mediterranean. And there's been constant struggles between white and Black forces over those lands, right? So the establishment of large Roman military presence changes the administrative and economic life and the failure of revolt in the diaspora. The immediate reason seemed to be the construction of a new city, Aelia Capitolina, over the ruins of Jerusalem. So pretty much the people, they felt defeated, right? And they just was not ready to revolt at that time, or for revolution, right? And the erection of the Temple of Jupiter on the Temple Mount, and the church fathers and the rabbinic literature emphasized the role of Rufus, governor of Judea, in provoking the revolt. The charismatic and messianic nature of the Bar Kokhba himself may have also been a factor. So now that I'm done with all of that, my brothers and sisters, let me close that out, pow. Close that out, pow. And I'm going to leave this map up here. I like that map. I'll be almost done, brothers and sisters. I just like this map. I want that map right there while I'm kicking it. I want this part to be seen. Yeah. It's the most important part. So the real deal is that basically I was asked a question, another dumb question, by religious dissenters, right? That are still trying to keep the spirit of this war going, a ethnic war going on between the Israelites and those of European dominated societies. And it's being perpetuated. It was being perpetuated by the Egyptians, as well as this stuff is being perpetuated by the Commetans today. And you see the former Cometan Garfield and the new Cometan Chris Harris. They both have been on social media asking me, how did, when the Romans from here conquered the Jews from here, how did the Jews from here get over to here? And I simply told him, first there was Jews already in here, which is Egypt, and the Jews fled unto Egypt, and many of them was put on ships in Israel and sailed into Egypt, came down in through the delta, so between one of these a waterway cut openings right in the delta, and came down into the interiors of Egypt, followed the Nile, and dropped these African Jewish people off into the other side of the Nile, and they made their ways into the interiors of Africa. They could have dropped them off at the very beginning of the Nile, and they could have just stayed north, right? Because they were already here. And the bottom line is that how did they get there? They migrated and through war came off into these areas and established Jewish settlements in the land of Cyrensia. I want to look up one more thing, and I'm going to end this, right? Because the secret relationship between the Americas and all of this was that there was no America at this time. These events right here in history is what shaped the Americas. It was an ethno-religio war taking place, right? And the Europeans had adopted Christianity, while the Africans and the blacks had adopted Judaism. And those that were not natural Jews had adopted Judaism, had been doing it since the days of the Greeks. And this is what started the many wars where Spain was taken back, because Spain, which is this area right here to the left, was dominated by Egypt since 1075 BCE, since the Great Dam broke. And then they also came there in 702 AD. And again, this is represented in Spanish cartouches, right? And they called the man who ushered these Africans into Africa and into Spain, he was Tarco. Tarco was none other than Taharka, Pharaoh Taharka, who made an alliance from Egypt with Israel against the Assyrians to the left over here, who came to dominate that land. So we have already had Africans and Israelites and Canaanites and biblical people who already established this area because of the many different conquerings of the people that flushed these people into the interior of Africa. So it was asked to me, well, how did they get into Africa, brother? And the reality was that they came into Africa by way of Egypt and by way of Ethiopia. Some has even went down, right? Like the Limba, they have a story where they went from Israel and went all down into Saudi Arabia, and into Saudi Arabia, they kept trekking all the way down. You see? They kept trekking all the way down, and they ended up in what you call Ethiopia, right? From Saudi Arabia going down south, they hook to the right, or I mean to or to the left, depending on how you're standing, and made their way west into the interior of Africa. And this is how the Ethiopian Jews has gotten there. Many different Jews came there. There's some Jews that has been in Africa since the Assyrian captivity. And others came in 70 AD, which was the last wave. There were several waves of people coming from the Levant into the interior of Africa. And what I'm reading to you is these facts. This stuff took place in Africa, y'all. This stuff didn't take place on the goddamn moon. Where did the Israelites go after Rome toppled Israel? Did they all die? Did they go to heaven? Did they vanish from the planet? No, they went into the interiors of Africa, certainly after the Roman revolt. They decided that Africa was the best place to be because the last major revolt they had, they shredded east and went into Assyria, and that had proven to be a no-no. So this is the relationship. So these people, which were Christian, right? European Christian, conquered Israel, right? Conquered Northern Africa, right? Then they went all the way up. Follow me. These people from here conquered here, all here. Then they went over and doubled up here, right? They didn't dominate here until 1492, though. It took them about another 1,500 years before they could ever dominate this area, right? But at that time, these people from here dominated all of this, right? But they didn't have a good stronghold here, right? Like they did here in England. It was at this England right here in Ireland was all Roman province, people. And it is these people, all of these people right here are the ancestors to your early Americans that came over. You see, 1492 is very important. So when these people conquered, these Romans here, these European Romans, they adopted Christianity and came and conquered these Israelite people right here. These people fled into the interior of Africa. Okay, then from going into Africa, they began to all this area in white. They dominated it, right? And then they made their way back over into Spain. And then in the 7th century, these blacks actually took back Spain in 711, where Tariq crossed Gibraltar, right? The Rock of Gibraltar, where he crossed over into Spain. Let me back up out of there. Let me see. I think, yeah. He crossed over into, He got the map here. He crossed on 711, crossed over into Spain, right? And these blacks dominated. The Jews had this land first, and they called the Arabs, which were blacks, which were Muslims, right? We talk about the Almohade and the Almoravid dynasties, right? They called these people in to help them to take back Spain from these Christians that were European Christians that were dominating Mind you, that Spain had and Egypt had already had black Christianity, as the Coptic and the Ge'ez form of Christianity. And these people were practicing that Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and they formed a coalition against just the European, ethno-national Europeans, which were Christians, right? And all of this activity is what spawned, right, and caused the slave trade of 1492. Because in 1492, when Tariq took back this land, these people became vassals. The blacks that was in that land became vassals to King Ferdinand and Isabella, who had Portugal, which is this area right here, and Isabella had Spain, all of this. And they married and solidified this whole area. Now this whole area is Portugal and Spain. Right. And in 1492, they took the Moors, which were the blacks, right? The Amorites, Amuru, right? Which were the original seafarers, the Egyptians and the Israelites, the blacks, the Saracens and the Hagarinis, right? Which were, and they took this land away from the blacks because it was a war taking place here that captured the general, a key general of the Moors' daughter. And he gave this land back to the Europeans who had his daughter ransomed without a fight, right? And told them, if you give my daughter back, I'll give you Spain, and all of my people that are in Spain will become your vassals. So the Roman Church, because this was ethno-religio nationality, right? The Roman Church, Rome dominated these lands through their spirituality, through Christianity, right? And the Israelites and the Moors were more of ethics. So this was an ethno-religio war. People of fighting that had ethics was fighting against people that had Christianity. And this fight in 1492 caused all the blacks, especially the Jews, to be banished in what was called the Spanish Inquisition. And I believe it was August 4th, 1492. The Jews was the last day given for the Jews to be expelled from Spain. It was the first day, or the next day, William Shakespeare set off for sails into the Americas. Mind you, Rome had already dominated the north, which was England, this area right here, which is just this area here. The Romans had already conquered this area, right? This is how, so this area is largely becoming Roman Catholic at this. And Christianity has had a foothold on it. And that's the reason why years later, Martin Luther got mad and protested against that Roman dominance, in which created the Protestant church. You see how all of this history is what correlating and what caused it? So these Jews that was set sail from this area right here, set sail off into the Atlantic Ocean west, with slaves and black folks in the fleet of ships heading west to the Americas. And this is how Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas. And later, the English came and set up colonies over here. And they set up colonies right after the Protestant Reformation, where the Anglo-Saxons no longer wanted Roman Catholicism as a religion and as a dominant power over them. So now we come around to 1611. King George writes this Bible. King James writes this Bible coming from the area of England, right? Mind you that you got Jews, Arabs, Muslims, Moors in this area already because they dominate in all of this, right? So there's a fight between basically the Moors and the European nations. And the Moors included the Israelites, the Canaanites, the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, just black people, y'all. It's funny how the lands that are signified here, that was, all of this was under Moorish rule, but the land that stayed more dominant under Moorish rule was the darker territories, where the lighter territories became ruled by the Roman Christians, Europeans, pre-Europeans, right? Or should I say sub-Europeans, because the original Europeans were named after Queen Europa, which was a descendant of Canaan, which was a descendant of Ham, meaning that she was black. And that's just according to the logic applied to the mythology here, the study of myths. So these blacks went into the interior Africa, got sold into the transatlantic slave trade. So the Christopher Columbus adventure opened the door for the African-American slave trade and the triangular trade. I call it the transatlantic triangular slave trade because it wasn't just a triangular trade. They had slaves on there and all types of stuff that they were trading down in there between this triangular trading route. And these Europeans made their way all the way to America. They established the 13 colonies, and America, as we know it, was established. But it was established off of the backs of the Moors that had already been here in America, that had already been in West Africa, Spain, Israel, Greece, Turkey, and Rome. So the correlation is that all of those wars, basically on the Christian side, the Europeans and the Christian side created the Europeans. They were the ancestors of the Europeans, as I'm telling you. The Romans, and which is, I believe it's either Javan, or it's one of the sons of Japheth, and the son of Gomer, which is another son of Japheth. Two Japhethite tribes had came together and dominated, and created the new world. And the Africans, no matter whether they was Christian, Muslim, or Jew, they lumped them up in all one fake, phony category, And once America has gotten established, I'm saying that the ancient Greco-Roman and Iberian foundation of America is come from Rome. The spirituality, all of that, the genetics, all of that come from Rome. So so that's pretty much how the ball bounces, and in that direction. But when the ball bounced in the other direction, we come to find out that the these people became African because by 1492, from 66 to 1492, you talking about 1,300 years. You're talking about actually over 1,400 years. Close to 1,500 years have taken place in North Africa, where Jews had dominated. And this is why we read about this man named Simon the Cyrene in Acts 13 chapter and verse 1. Verse 1. The man who carried Jesus' cross. There's a scripture referred to this man as Simon the Cyrene, and there's other scripture that refer to him as Simon the Niger. And that word is pronounced Niger. The Niger, not Niger. And not the other N word that is banned from Facebook and YouTube with the double G and the hard R. You know, this is Niger. You know what I'm saying? Or a negra. You know, Niger and negra. You know, negra and negro. You know, same people. The Niger, Simon the Niger, the Simon of Cyrencia. Come on, people, we going back to North Africa. Cyrencia, this area right here. It is from this area right here that the Bible was canonized, and not this area right here, which is Rome. People, it's here in red that the Bible was canonized up under the conference of Hippo and the conference of Carthage, I believe. Carthage. This is Carthage. This is what I'm telling you. Carthage is where the Bible was canonized. The Bible was canonized in Africa, people. It was not canonized in Rome. Well, you would ask the question, well, what happened there in Rome there? Well, Rome, what happened at the conference of Nicaea was that they was arguing and trying to figure out the nature of Christ, not the books and the scriptures. The books and the scriptures did not get discussed and put together and canonized until the conference of Cyrencia and the conference of Hippo. So what they got to do with anything? That means that the Bible that you have was compiled right here in Africa and not here in Rome, right? And not here to the left in Rome, north left, you know, in Rome, but right to the south, right in Africa. And this is where the war, the last two showdowns of these Europeans trying to dominate these black people over here in Israel, right? In Israel, causing them to run into the terriers of Africa. And then 1,500 years later, they get sucked off into the slave trade, the Jews, the Israelites, these same people from right here that the Bible talk about in Acts 13:1 and several other places throughout the New Testament. Especially when they talk about Simon, who carried Jesus' cross, a man from here, a Jew. His name is Simeon. Let's look his name up. Let's look up this man. You think I'm playing? I say Simon because that's what the Bible called him, but they called him Simeon, right? Let's look at Simon. Share my screen. Simon the Cyrene, or Simon the Niger, 1G-E-R. And allow me to share my screen here. That's Cyrene right there, Cyrencia, right? Cyrene, that area. A Cyrene is a person from Cyrencia, people, from Africa, right? And stop share screen and then push present so I can share this. Share screen. And we can read right here, right? It talk about Simon right here. We're going to blow this up. This is Wikipedia. It's just simple. The Bible called him Simon, as you can see where my cursor is. Simon the Niger, the Niger. The Niger. That's not N-I the other way. That's E, not ne, Niger. And we can look it up and prove these things. The actual pronunciation, according to the Strong Concordance, is Niger. Simon the Niger, right? It said he is mentioned in Acts 13:1 as being one of the prophets and teachers in the church of Antioch. We know that the early Christians were Jews, right? In the church at Antioch, there were prophets and teachers, right? Barnabas, Simon called the Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene. Simon called the Niger because in that language, Simon, Simeon, as we go right down here to where the Wikipedia thing is, if I push that button and it'll open up Wikipedia, they called him not Simon, but Simeon. And Simeon the Black, which is the Black Jew from the tribe of Simeon. Man, cut it out, people. Cut it out. This man is Simeon, y'all. You got to wake up because these people dwelt right here where it says Lucius of Cyrene. All of these guys were Jews. They were Jews who had been prior exiled into the Mediterranean. North Africa is the Mediterranean, from Egypt all the way on over to the Atlantic Ocean, on both sides of the northern, southern equators or hemispheres. People, you got to understand that these Europeans were the same Europeans that was recorded going all the way back in history, that destroyed Acadia, the Sumerians, right? The Sumerians, the Gomerites, the Qumri, right? The Gutians, right? The people from Corinthia, for Corinth, right? And the people from what's the New Testament books that represent those Greek islands and the Europeans? All of those people were the old Gutians, going way, way back before the days of Abraham. People, wake up. Both the African American and the European in America are the descendants of the historical old world. And history is ours. Those were our ancestors, people. And that is the correlation. The African Americans descend from the Moors and the Hagarenes and the Saracenes. The Hagarenes were the people that descend from Hagar, which were the Muslims, basically. That's what the Europeans from Spain and Rome called the Black Muslims. They called them the Hagarenes. And they called the Black Jews the Saracenes, from Sarah and Hagar. People, wake up. The African Americans are the direct descendants of these people. And on this page, clearly, my DNA has been established that I am a Mozabite, which originally were Black Jews of Northern Africa. And today, since the Romans and the Greeks had dominated that area, then the French had dominated that area. Many Europeans have dominated that area, and they have amalgamated with the Blacks of that area and created a whole nother race. Yes. And these are the Tamizags, right? Because the Sanhajas, the Mozabite was a Sanhaja tribe. a Mazab tribe, right? And these people were basically a Senegalese people. Pretty much look like my brother Tory Bolton. You know, Tory Bolton, you know what you look like? You look like a Senegalese African. You know, you wanted to know what type of African, who your phenotypes look like. You look a lot like the Africans from Senegal, which were the same people as the Mozab, right? The Senhaja, right? The Senaga and the Senhaja, right? Same people. Same people, brother. They got swooped off into the slave trade. The people that dominated the kingdom of Mali and the kingdoms of Ghana, less off, if not at all, the kingdom of Songhai, because it was the kingdom of Songhai that banned these people and forced these Jews into becoming anything other than who they were, because it was that Judaism and that Hebrewism that was banned on the southern side of the Mediterranean, and it was the Alhambra decree that banned Judaism on the northern side of the Mediterranean. People, what I'm telling y'all is the absolute facts. You're not going to get this from the One West cult Israelites. You're not going to get this type of information from guys standing on the corner with bullhorns. You're going to get this type of information from men who have been studied in colleges and universities and that has traveled around this world. Men like myself. I am not a racist. I did not build my program to preach racism and hatred for other races. Neither did I bring up this topic for us to have hatred, but for the African American and the European American can understand that we have a heritage in the Bar Kokhba revolt, that we have a heritage that started not in America, but in the Roman-Jewish Wars. And that the Israelites has been slaved to Rome ever since the Roman and Jewish Wars. The Roman Church has never given up their slavery and apologized for this. Well, yes, they did. Yes, they did. But I haven't seen nothing in document, but when you look at it in the newspaper or something like that, and it's still recorded, it's documented. But it took, what, 1,900 years? 1,300 years? 1,500 years, people? I am going to conclude. And as I make my conclusion, the correlation that we have between the Roman-Jewish Wars, the Kitos Wars, the Bar Kokhba Wars, Africa, and the Americas is the creation of America that we have today. It is those same Europeans that was dominating and enslaving those same Africans. It was those same Christians that was trying to dominate those black Jews, which were which were Saracenes, the Saracens or the Saraceni, right, from Sarah, that was, and the Hagarenes that was from Hagar, the blacks, the Moors. We done showed y'all in the last series that I've been talking about how the Moors came over to America way back in the days of the Greeks. And as we was reading about, I believe it was the battle, was it the Battle of Quitos or was it the Bar Kokhba revolt? I think it was Ketos, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been Bar Kokhba, that was instigated by the Greeks. This is fire, y'all. I mean, this video is going to be a very, very good one. I made sure that there was no profanity involved, that there was no racial slurs thrown, or even intentions of evil, but to make the American understand that he has a stake in ancient history, that the Romans are the descendants of the European Anglo-Saxons, ancestors of the Anglo-Saxons today. Because remember how I showed y'all how Rome went up into it was actually Emperor Septimius, a black Roman. Septimius Severus took these Roman garrisons right up into England. And when he got there, he said he saw a black people. Oh, no, and Julius Caesar was his general. And Julius Caesar recorded that when he got there, he saw a group of black people called the Silures already there in England, what we know as England today. So I'm stating to you how this correlation is what created what we have as America today. And the same people that was involved in Rome, the RomanJewish Wars, the Ketos Wars, the Bar Kokhba Revolt, Africa and America, all was the same people in the same fight that has started all the way back in the Roman system, days of the Roman Empire. These are the facts. This is the correlation here, you know. And you see the Europeans are still embracing their Christianity, right? And African Americans are leaving that enslavement and that heathenism, right? And that Christian philosophy. They're leaving that, you see, and they're embracing right now. They're going back home to Judaism and Hebrewism, which is their original home school of thought. You know, that's what we're doing. So I want to open up the panel for anyone who have in the audience that may have any questions, you know, or will have anything that they would like to say. And I'll open it up the panel for phone calls or anybody that would like to call. You know, this is a very, 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 very profound and historically accurate dissertation. And it was these type of researchers that I was blowing my professors away at Knoxville University, at Wayne County Community College, and at Wayne State University. It was these type of researchers and this type of historical analysis that I would put into my thesis and into my research papers that led me on the honor roll, that led me on the dean's list, that led me into the honor society. Mind you, this was a young man who never ever thought that he could ever even make it to those heights intellectually. Y'all hit that like button, hit that share, hit that subscribe. I'm getting ready to get out of here. And I have another show that I have coming up. I have a young man by the name of Nasserine Yahuda that I'm going to bring on. I hope he was the guy who called earlier today. I'm fixing to end this show. And in about 10 or 20 minutes, me and him is going to try to get up another show where I can interview him. He got some good stuff that he's going to bring to you all. But that being stated, this is Yasha Ben Yishrael. Hit that cash app, $, capital Y, lowercase ASHA, capital B, lowercase EN, capital YISHRAEL. Shalom Aleichem Hamishpakat is Lahamishpakat Yisrael. Yom Tov.